Good morning, everyone. I'm Madhura from Mentor Together, and it is with immense pride and honor that I welcome all of you to the first Mentoring Summit India 2024. Yes. About 6 months ago, when our team at Mentor Together sat down to plan for this year, we thought about how we could celebrate the important milestone that was upcoming for our organization in November. That is our 15th year anniversary. For 15 years, our organization has been deeply focused on one big question. What is the design of good mentoring? How can we help young people in India access high-quality mentorship that helps them achieve their goals and dreams? We felt that the best way to celebrate this important milestone as an organization would be to convene all of you, an incredibly vibrant community of youth mentoring practitioners, champions, and advocates who can come together to reflect on the best practices of mentoring and chart the path ahead of youth mentoring in India, and more broadly, the Global South. When we started putting the building blocks of this summit together, we were honestly so overwhelmed by the positive response and encouragement. And a big thank you to LinkedIn, the British Asian Trust, the BT Group, the Brookings Center for Universal Education, and the Agency Fund, who stood with us at every step of the way for the last 6 months in putting together the Mentoring Summit India 2024. Many of you have traveled from all over India, and some of you from halfway across the world. We're so grateful for your time, commitment, and belief in the mentoring movement. The next 2 days are going to be packed. There are 26 sessions with over 70 speakers spread across 3 primary venues in this beautiful Bangalore International Center venue. This auditorium, we have the seminar hall on the 1st floor and the gallery on the 2nd floor. There are also workshops happening in the library simultaneously. And if you want to access any information, you can go on our official website, which is thementoringsummit.org. You'll find the schedule section where you'll find all of the agenda. And you get to choose which session you want to attend, because we have 3 parallel sessions running for every slot, except for this one, which is our opening plenary. So to talk more about the design of the sessions, you'll see a few themes that the sessions are planned around. First, how does mentoring fit in with external contents of public policy, educational systems, corporate social responsibility, volunteering, and technology? Second, how does mentoring apply to specific youth contexts to drive youth change makers? For young people in care systems, for students in school, for those facing conditions of marginalization, for girls and women across life stages. And finally, how do we design mentoring programs, processes, and the mentoring relationship itself to be evidence-based and impactful? We're absolutely sure that whether you're from the government, business, academic, or nonprofit sector, or whether you're a mentor, student, teacher, through this entire mentoring summit, you'll feel empowered, inspired, equipped, and I'm sure you'll leave with a lot of actionable measuring points at the end of the 2 days. If you have any questions, we're happy to help you as a team. Great. I think we have a truly inspiring session to begin with, and let's get started. Please join me in welcoming our host and moderator for the opening plenary of the Mentoring Summit India 2024, Smarnita Shetty. Smarnita is the CEO and founder of the Indian Development Review, the foremost publication capturing the beats of India's vibrant development sector. Smarnita has also worked in Dasra, Monitoring Inclusive Markets, JP Morgan, and the Economic Times. Thank you. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Arundhati Gupta. Arundhati Gupta is the visionary founding trustee and chief executive of Mentor Together. She set up Mentor Together 2 years after graduating from university. For her work building mentoring models and systems unique to the needs of India's young people, she's been recognized as an Ashoka Fellow and a Brookings Ekatna Global Scholar. Arundhati graduated at the university as the University Gold Medalist in Commerce and was a Commonwealth Scholar at the University of Manchester. Thank you. I would now like to invite our next panelist, Dr. Kiran Modi. Dr. Kiran set up Udayan Care in the year 1994 to support children and youth who are separated from families. Core to the Udayan Care model is the role of a volunteer mentor who steps in to heal the relational deficits a young person may face. She is the recipient of the National Award for Child Welfare 2014, India's highest commendation for a non-profit child welfare organization. Welcome, Dr. Modi. Next, I'd like to invite on stage Ian McBride. Ian heads responsible business for BT Group in India. He leads the company's manifesto to accelerate social impact through technology and digital skills. Originally from the UK and now settled in India, Ian has a rich background working with organizations focused on skill development and gender equity. Welcome. And yes, last but absolutely not the least, would we like to invite Dr. Mark Eddy. Dr. Mark is a professor of education psychology at the University of Texas. He is a prevention scientist who has designed and rigorously studied mentoring programs across the range of contexts in the US and Central America. He is also the editor of the upcoming Handbook of Professional Youth Mentoring, which also features a chapter of mentoring in India, authored by Mentor Together. Great, thank you so much and welcome everybody. And I would now request Smanita to please kickstart the session. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Madhura. And good morning, everyone, and welcome once again to the opening plenary of India's first ever mentoring summit, like Madhura said. It gives me great joy to be anchoring this session with 4 really amazing guests because they're not only going to provide us context, but also perspectives and data from 4 very different vantage points, right? As a funder, as a practitioner, as an advocate, and a researcher. So thank you all for being part of this panel. And before I move on to questions for you, which is where I want to spend most of the time, I just thought I'll give the audience a little bit of background. So I think all of us in this room, understand the word mentoring, right? And the value it brings, because I'm guessing almost all of us have, benefited from it in some shape and form. We've had a mentor, either in school, in college, or at work. Someone who has shaped how we think of ourselves in the world, what we think of ourselves, what we achieve, and in some way, has played a role in getting us to where we are today, right? And yet, there are millions of young people in India who have no such access. This year, that's in 2024, the young population is estimated to be around 420 million, right? Which is 29% of our total population. And approximately 10% of them, or over 40 million, are not employed. Existing evidence suggests that one of the most promising paths for young people is to provide them with guidance, information, and mentoring. So clearly there's a direct benefit right there, right? But unemployment is not the only or the largest gap that mentoring fills. It works for children facing, violence. It works for children and young people facing addiction, people in at-risk positions, young women and girls, and so on, right? And what we've seen is actually mentoring programs across the world are now being seen as one of the most effective, positive practices for youth development. And I think that's mainly because people are seeing that every aspect of human development is shaped by interpersonal relationships. So what does mentoring mean, right? And I think the panelists here will actually speak to, the different facets, but I thought just like a slightly more formal way of thinking about it is mentorship is essentially a powerful tool for empowering young people, especially those at the margins, by building their self-confidence, their self-esteem, self-worth, giving them relatable role models, helping them gain access to educational opportunities, building their social capital and networks, right? All of things that we kind of take for granted, but mentoring is a much more formal, way of kind of doing that. But the other thing, we must understand is mentoring has always been understood, and I always get my tongue twisted in this, but what experts call a relational instrumental continuum, and this is something that Arundhati told me, where first and foremost, there's a relationship between a mentor and a mentee. And we all know this, right? And second, there is a goal or an objective that the relationship tries to achieve for the mentee. So in this opening plenary, in our conversation today, we will focus on what this relational aspect of mentoring looks like and why young people need to be fundamentally surrounded by positive and healthy relationships that nurture them. So I'm going to just jump into the questions, and Arundhati, and start with you. Like I said, right, everyone understands the word mentoring, but when you see it in practice, you see so little attention or investment kind of, devoted to it, right? So can you speak a little bit, can you set the context in terms of, how does it look like from a policy, non-profit, and like a broader development, space, the whole mentoring ecosystem in a sense?
Well, thank you so much. Y'all can hear me, right? Y'all can? Okay, great. No, thank you so much. I want to just reiterate what Madhura said, that we're so pleased to have you all here and to put this together and to have this be our opening plenary. I think, yes, that so much of human development happens through these positive relationships of the kind that mentoring promotes, right? And I think that's at the core of why mentoring is seen to be such a fundamental, almost right and privilege for everyone to have, especially young people. I think that I'll speak a little bit to three things that I think mentoring does very well that makes it so universal, and then how that applies to the objectives and goals of policy, nonprofits, and corporates especially. The typical way to look at the role of a mentor is in three important ways for young people. One, in the role that a relationship provides for social and emotional development. That all of us are not naturally born into understanding how to manage our emotions, how to deal with other people. And almost all of that gets built through the positive interactions that we have with other adults, right? And that experience growing up really just shapes, are we able to figure out what is the right way to do that? And for any young person who's coming with any sort of a relational deficit, which Dr. Kiran will speak about, that you're already starting from a place where healthy relationships have led to poorer emotional, social, or lack of healthy relationships have led to that, right? So there is just core abilities to build social and emotional skills through the role of a mentor, primarily when they take on a role as a very patient, listening, non-judgmental adult. The second thing that's so important that is then the mentor, because mentors are typically seen as someone with more years of experience, someone who's possibly got more networks and resources, is the simple idea of guidance, right? Which is probably what all of us think of mentoring as. And it can be so vital if targeted correctly at the need and the context of the young person, to help in academic decision-making, career decision-making, just new networks of opportunities, what information and careers do you even know about, right? So that's the second really important role. And then the third one, which actually, if you ask all of us in Mentor Together, is probably our favorite role, because it's the role of identity development, right? How do we become the people we become, right? It happens often very subconsciously because of the influences of the people around us, what we see them tell us about ourselves, what we see them say about themselves, and how that just shapes that vision of who we are in the future. And I think mentoring is so powerful for that. So given these three contexts, then if you think of this role of social emotional development, guidance, and role modeling, if you think it matches so many of our priorities at the policy level with respect to young people, right? A lot of the guidance aspects relate to what we're trying to achieve through school education. Hopefully better academic choices, better grades, better career decisions, right? So many of the things relate on social and emotional well-being to what we may have as from the youth adolescent policies, right? To help young people thrive and flourish. So, and then a lot of the goals around guidance also relate to employment policies. So I think there's a very clear policy angle there. With nonprofits, really anybody that works with mentoring has or with young people has the opportunity to think of a mentoring approach, right? And then, and I'll end with this, that in this broader ecosystem about when we think about who is the mentor, we have seen that companies are one of the very promising and possible sources to identify large numbers of mentors. So I think that's where, if you take the principal idea of mentoring, you can really fit it into the priorities that exist for government, for nonprofits, and for businesses, whether it's CSR or volunteering.
Yeah, no, thanks, Arundhati. I think you've laid the framework really well, right? And the different intersections that each stakeholder in a sense has with mentoring. Kiran, if I can come to you, you've run Udayan Care for more than 30 years. You worked with young people in fractured family homes and settings, and you've seen how important healthy relationships are. Can you tell us a little bit about what you've learned and the lessons, and what has worked, what hasn't, so that the audience who work with young people in any shape and form, they can take away some of those learnings as well.
So good morning, everyone. And I really need to, pay you a compliment. That's something which was so near to our hearts, and you've been able to actually fructify it, and you are doing this mentoring summit. So in Udayan Care, we've been, when we started our children's home, let me start from there. We realized that these children, they had suffering from insecure attachment, fragmented homes. They come after a lot of trauma and abuse, and they start looking at everything with distrust. How do you develop their trust? How do you turn that distrust into, a solid tool for them so that they can evolve themselves like any individual? And when your family, because of many reasons, also gives you up, then this abandonment also makes you very, very untrustworthy. So when we started looking after these children, I realized that we need to bring mentors who are going to bring secure attachments. Unless the children develop secure attachments, they are never going to be fulfilled individuals. And here, I think, going deeper into psychology, and especially, John Bowlby, his attachment theory, and Erik Erikson's psychosocial development theory, and Yuri Frontbrenner's ecological systems theory, all these theory helped us in understanding the role of a mentor, a long-term mentor who can be there and who can help the child develop their social, emotional, cognitive development. If this child, as a significant individual, is there to look after the child forever, in our case, we have lifelong mentors. We are 35 of us, and only 2 of us have parted company because the maker called them. Otherwise, everybody had stuck on with the children. And the kind of values and the kind of, future career path we have been able to chart out with the children, help them reflect, help them, grow. And with the team of psychologists and counselors that we have been able to work on whatever the deficits they have, how they can overcome it. So I think it had been a beautiful journey. And the mentor parents, they've been chosen with great care. We looked at senior citizens, people who have already fulfilled their role of developing their own children, becoming successful in their careers. So they can bring in a lot of parenting skills. So we looked at those kind of people and who could make a long-term commitment. And we also looked at a very, very learner's mindset. unless you become 60 and you think, oh, I know everything, I have raised my children and I know. It's not like that. Children who have suffered, who are traumatized, who are abused, they need a different way of handling. Unless you understand the psychological constructs, it's very difficult to raise. So we always looked for those people who are ready, who have a learner's mindset. So we developed a lot of training programs around psychological constructs, around child rights, around the Juvenile Justice Act, because they also need to learn all this if they are to work in a children's home. We developed our programs and processes in a very, very established manner and made them understand what is it and what you can expect from us and what we expect from you. So the expectation setting was made very, very clear to them. And accordingly, people started functioning. And I think it had been a very, very beautiful journey and very fulfilling, because each mentor has brought in so much of knowledge. And we have these monthly meetings where all the mentors sit together. We discuss the cases with the psychologist. We discuss with each other what worked and what did not work. Because something which may not have worked with me may have worked with her. Because everybody has a different approach and a different attitude. So we learned a lot from each other. I think for any kind of a mentor group, it's very, very essential that they sit together, they discuss all the problems that they are coming across, what are the successes and what are the failures. That's one way to go ahead. So these are, certain things that we did, and I would just like to mention a few case studies, I mean, I've got hundreds, where the children are doing so well. A child who's coming in at the age of 6, totally traumatized and not wanting to study and not able to concentrate, with the great help of the mentors and the psychological team. We have been able to get them involved back into the society, back into the life. And many of our children, they have been able to study for their masters abroad, all on their own steam. Because, there was someone who cared, and there was someone, who supported them in their journey. So this is the Ghar program, where the children are from disadvantaged backgrounds and from disrupted homes. But we are also working for children who are coming from disadvantaged backgrounds, but may not be as psychologically torn or traumatized. So we have, these youth who we are working with for higher education. We have a full-fledged mentoring program there also. But there we don't need to go so much into child trauma, but we go more into developing how do you develop a child's professional skills? How do you develop a child more interested in education and vocational training? How do you help them in developing their life skills, for example? It's, a girl coming from a very poor family would not have an assertiveness in her. So how do you teach assertiveness to her, negotiation skills, communication skills, all these kind of things that we expect from these mentors. And again, with corporate social responsibility so much on the high, we are very lucky to get a lot of corporates coming in and who are doing long-term mentoring. So we expect them to do at least 2 years of mentoring of these girls. And I'm very proud to say that now we have got 2,500 mentors, even here all across India.
Thanks, Kiran. And I think there's some really good learnings you said, right? Like one is setting expectations, with mentors, actually training them, because, more damage can be done if the mentors are not trained, peer learning, all of that. And I think what you said about funders segues well into, Ian, what I'm going to ask you is, because most funders that we've seen, and we've been in the sector for a while, will fund like things like education or livelihoods, right? Things that they can actually put a number to, how many kids enrolled, how many kids are placed. So it's very interesting that the BT group has chosen to, fund mentoring. I just want to get a sense of what the thinking was behind that, right? Because it's not usual.
Absolutely, and thanks, Arundhati, for giving me the opportunity to come down and join your panel. Well, mentoring is just one of the things that we support. I mean, so prior to my moving onto the corporate side, I'd spent 25, 30 years working in learning and development and skill development in the UK and India. And I'd seen lots of education and skill programs impart skills and education, but then fail on so many other levels, whether it was getting people into employment or into further education, or we would have people from under-resourced communities, either in the UK and India, drop out of school. So it's very, very clear that there's a lot more needed than just giving a skill. If you have a skill, but you do not have the confidence or the contacts or the to be able to access what is really ostensibly a different world to you, then a lot of it can be in vain. So, so I'd worked with different non-profits here in India for 10 or 12 years. And when I went onto the funding side of things, I was really determined not to make the mistakes of the worst kinds of funding corporates that I'd seen and had to deal with as a non-profit. And I thought, I don't want to be like them. You know, I did not want us to be the kind of organization, I call them pay and display corporates. You know, they pay out some funding, you send them, they get a report twice a year, and then they put something often quite nauseating in an annual report and say what they've done. We're really, really hands-on, as you know, Arundhati. We speak weekly, as we do with all our partners. So we felt with mentoring, it was absolutely crucial to be able to give people support that they needed above and beyond just skills. And there are other elements to that other than mentoring. But I think career development, career guidance is another area that needs a lot of support and able to help people identify the right jobs that suit their aptitude, their ability, and their interests. And I think, thinking back to when I was a kid, I'm from a small mining town, from a working class family. We, the career guidance teacher would tell us, go and work in the steelworks. It's now owned by Tata, by the way. And then they would tell girls you'd go and be a secretary or work in a factory. There was no motivation in a working class town to be anything above and beyond that. And I'm going back donkey's years now. And I see the similar problem here in India. So I think, you know, two things are: one, getting people to understand jobs, new economy jobs, future jobs that they have the potential to succeed in, rather than the typical traditional roles that people are pushed in by their parents, which are oversubscribed. But the other thing is mentoring. You know, how do you give people support? There's an element, and we at BT, we fund organizations, particularly through technology and STEM, trying to encourage young women from under-resourced communities to take up careers in STEM. But there's an element of social mobility there that needs to be assisted. You cannot just take someone and put them into a different world and expect them to cope very, very easily. You know, the social cues that people give off by their class, from their clothes, from their accent, to how they behave, can be very, very intimidating if you're a first-time graduate. You know, if you're a first-time person in your whole family who's gone into further education, if you're first-time working in a corporate environment, particularly as a woman. So what support do you need to do that? So we've tried to build a set of programs that look at all those things. You know, it's not just about giving out devices in areas where people do not have access to devices, or giving them support to use those devices. It's about working with a whole ecosystem, with families, getting them to support, you know, girls staying in education, not dropping out and going into work. That's another part of it. But mentoring plays a huge part of that, because girls need role models. We all need role models. You know, people need someone that they can look up to, like an Arundhati, for example, or, you know, anyone sitting here, you know, Dr. Modi, and say, well, actually, they've achieved that and they've done that, and I've got access to them, and they can help me navigate all these problems that I'm finding moving into the workplace. So that's it.
Yeah. No, thanks, Ian. Mark, if I can come to you, you've actually studied mentoring, right, for the last, 30 plus years. You've done research, you've built evidence, and in a sense, mentoring has become mainstreamed in the US, right? What were some of the factors that helped it become like mainstream, right? And who were some of the key actors who kind of made it happen? So that it's in front and center of everyone. Could you speak a little to that?
Yes, so various versions of mentoring have been going on in the United States since the beginning of the country, but things really took off in the beginning of around 1910, when a group called Big Brothers, that eventually became Big Brothers Big Sisters, was formed. And that group has continued and expanded around the country. And the first more scientifically rigorous research that was conducted on mentoring was done in the late 1930s. And a study continued on until the 70s. So we've got about 80 years of research that's been going on in mentoring. Most of that research has focused on programs like Big Brothers Big Sisters, but what's important to know in the United States is that most children who get mentoring do not get it through that kind of organization, but are getting it through other venues. And the most popular one is through sports. So there's almost 30 million children involved in sports in the United States. And I have some personal experience in that, not only as a coach, but also my father and my siblings being involved in coaching and playing at the college level and the pro level. And unfortunately, in that sector, it's kind of a train and hope model. I think people aspire to be good mentors, but they often don't get a lot of support in how to do that except around sports skills. So that's kind of an area of need. But anyway, other areas that mentoring is quite popular in the United States includes in rural areas around farming issues. And so there's clubs, that are in high school and also in primary school. But mentoring over the years has really been used originally and still today with children who are either at risk or involved in the juvenile justice system, so they're getting in trouble with the law, and also with children in other kinds of difficult situations, like in foster care, where they have left their homes and are placed with another family. But also around career issues and other things. So it really has kind of penetrated a lot of different sectors, but probably one of the most interesting ones of late in terms of a heavy dose of funding from the federal level began during the second George Bush administration, so the younger George Bush president, and his pitch to the U.S. was that he was a compassionate conservative, and he established this Office of Religious Affairs within the White House. And there was a person who was involved in mentoring a version of Big Brothers Big Sisters that had been adapted for use in Christian churches. And that person had quite a lot of influence on the presidential administration. And I remember being at a meeting during that administration where they promised something like $400 million that was going to go to support youth mentoring for children who had parents in prison, because in the United States we have the largest number of people in prison in the world in terms of rate. And so there was a significant investment that began then and continued through all the administrations since, including the Obama administration and more recently the Biden administration, that's focused on children who have parents who are in prison. And so the difficulty there is that there hasn't been a lot of research paired with all of this service provision. So I was asked to write a chapter on this particular type of mentoring a few years ago, and I really was able to find very little literature. So although we have a lot of research literature in one sense, we have not as much on specific issues as we'd like. So we've made progress, but we have a long ways to go.
Yeah, but I guess you have research from 1930. That's almost like 100 years of research, which I think is amazing. So research, funding, to the level that you kind of mentioned, right? I guess a lot of factors that play in. Arundhati, he spoke about some of these factors. What is your vision for mentoring in India? And what, according to you, would a supportive ecosystem look like?
Yeah, I'm always so envious, and essentially the way we learned of Mark's work is Mark was writing a book on the Handbook of Professional Mentoring, which is a very interesting sort of sub-area of where mentors are more than just volunteers. And he reached out to us to write the chapter on mentoring in India, and I think in the last 15 years I've seen that we were talking that there are maybe 40 academics who have devoted their careers to studying mentoring in the US, and every year are probably publishing 4 or 5 papers, which just means there's an incredible amount of research. So I think that I'd like to use the idea of how do you build a new field or a new market in India, right? It's a very interesting framework, and I'd say that that's one of the first components that we need to have, that there's just a lot of very good knowledge, research, and research around the practice. I don't think we need, like the corporates in ivory towers, which Ian is not, we don't need more academics in ivory towers, so I think we need more people, though building an understanding of what is the theory of change for mentoring in India. What's the long-term impact of mentoring that goes on for 30 years, right? What happens when you mentor young women in colleges? So I would say that's the vision. Could we get, India has such a large number of universities, right? Could we get 50 academics to take up, so that's one vision in terms of the knowledge and research that the field really needs. And I think it's so important because I have seen how the field of mentoring in the US has directionally changed a lot based on how the academics have worked closely with them. So you mentioned the relational instrumental model, right? Where fundamentally mentoring is always a relationship. And that's the beauty of it, right? I think of it as like Aladdin's carpet, right? The carpet is the relationship and it's where you go with that. And then the focus on the goals was always lesser because I think they were very heavy set on let's give the relationship. And they realized then that for young people who are living in these very complex setups, you're facing all these problems of your parents incarcerated problems. You can't just assume this mentor comes in like, oh, and now I'm going to solve everything for you. If the mentor doesn't know what they're doing, how are they trained to handle that? How are they challenging their own biases and stereotypes? More often than not, they're ineffective, right? That's what the research in the US found for the biggest models of mentorship. And now they've changed. And that's because the researchers were working so close in hand with the nonprofits. So I think that's the first vision that I have. The second thing I'd say is just then that how can it make it into policy, like I said, and also into corporates. I'd say that we are seeing some encouraging movement in policy. We have a lot of members from the government of Karnataka's Department of Collegiate and Technical Education here who have started a mentoring program and put mentoring on the agenda for higher education in the state. And that's no small scale because it's 500 plus colleges, 450,000 students. So how can it make it into the mandate formally for education, for everyone who looks at education at the school level, at the college level? I'd say those two. And I think we have Karnataka, Telangana, a few of the states that we work with who are already leading on this, and more needs to happen. I'd say with the corporates, why can't we have the top 100 companies who have some of the largest workforces and the biggest CSR spends all put their money into mentoring, right? In fact, it's almost a no-brainer because your employees will be the mentors and all you have to do is support high-quality programs amongst nonprofits that deliver all of this, right? And I'd say that in our experience, it's probably 15 or so that are interested in doing that. It should be 100, easily, right? And then the last thing I'd say is just how can all the nonprofits, and we're so excited that all of you are here, many of you do work that's very adjacent to mentoring already with young people. How can we layer on mentoring into the work that you do so that whether you're working on sports and you have a coach, whether you're working with teachers or whether you're working with volunteers, you can help them take on that mentoring role. I'd say that's really the vision for all of these stakeholders.
Thanks, Arundhati. I think you've painted a really good vision. I think it's now up to all of us to actually go and take parts of that and in the places we work in and make that happen, right? Because I think like all of y'all have said, such a critical importance of anyone working with young people in whatever shape and form. And so every stakeholder, young people is what matters, right? Whether you're government, whether you're business, whether you're a non-profit. And so thank you for that. But you also mentioned the role of mentors, and Kiran, I want to come to you on that. Because you've worked extensively and you mentioned a little bit about how training is important, how unlearning is important. What's the responsibility of mentors, right? Because the focus is always on the mentee, but the mentors are such a critical part. So what's the responsibility of mentors in this whole ecosystem, and what is the infrastructure that is needed to kind of support them?
Yeah. I think the first and foremost is stick on. If the mentor is not going to stick on, it's never going to evolve, because we have to remember children, whether they are coming from broken families and have a warped understanding of the world around them, environment around them, or children who are coming from disadvantaged backgrounds, but they need a lot of counseling and guidance, whatever kind of children or youth there may be. But if the mentor is not going to stick on, then nothing can happen. And you can't expect that, a child is waiting there to open up the moment you say, okay, here I am for you. You have to prove it. In Bengal, we have a very interesting thing, when they make a drum, they beat it and they beat it and they beat it. And the more sound it creates, they beat it even further. The idea is, bajiye dekho, baja ki dekho, how much can the drum can take, So similarly, a child is testing you. A child is testing you again and again. Are you going to stick on? Or you are just coming here to show your face and make a good impression in the world? So the children are very clever. They always test you out. This is my experience of so many years. I've been telling mentors, please stick on. Don't expect them to open up suddenly. When you were a child, suddenly some uncle had come and told you something. Would you have opened up? It takes time. You have to build trust. So I think this is very, very important. And otherwise, the kind of infrastructure support, as I told you, we have developed different mentoring models for different kinds of, children and youth who are coming to us. And for everything, we have put it down into manuals and training programs, not only for the mentors. I think it's very, very important for the mentees also to be formally trained. What can they expect from the mentors? And we do that very, very regularly. Then I think very important for the staff also to learn what can they expect from the mentors and what kind of feedback, honest feedback, and what kind of, relationship they must develop with the mentors. So it all depends. I think one of the biggest responsibility of a mentor is, like leaders develop leaders, right? So similarly, mentors have to develop mentors. So we have developed a beautiful peer mentoring system in the Udayan Shalini Fellowship Program, which is called Mentor Didi. So each girl, when she comes in at the age of 16, she gets mentors and she's mentored. So 5 girls have one mentor. And Mentor Didi, the Mentor Didi is one who has already been mentored for several years. So now she can become a Mentor Didi, and 5 Mentor Didis, they have another mentor, a senior mentor coming from a corporate background, teaching background. We have all kinds of mentors, and we look at different professions, because each one is bringing in a different kind of a outlook to the whole thing. So I think this is very important. When we are talking about research, I think Udayan Care has been hugely involved in research. We take out a journal of our own on child protection, and even the mentor model of Udayan Care, we have published papers, and even for the Shalini program. So whatever we do, we always believe that evidence has to be created. Once the evidence is created, then you can take back the learnings and bring it into practice. So it has to be a continuous process. So this is what I feel. And one more thing, I really want to say, responsibility of the mentors that we were talking about. Why God has given you 2 ears but only 1 mouth? Because speaking is, so much easier as compared to hearing. So we have to be listeners. Unless you listen to a child and read between the lines, you will never be able to, because as mentors, as people who are getting on in age, we are always in a hurry to give our, point of view, not caring for the child, the way the child is thinking, what is the worldview of the child, and how can we make the child reflect and think of better things. So I think one major responsibility of a mentor is to be a listener, more than anything else.
I want to just say that it's all of us who work with mentors, I think we're very conscious of the fact that you have to understand the class and the cultural context of India, right? I think in an article that came out about the summit, I was quoted as saying that the Guru Shishya Parampara is very authoritarian. I was like, oh no, but it is. You can't take, those are great templates in India. There's culturally a lot of models of mentorship that give us a lot of deep understanding of why mentoring is so integral to India. However, when we're thinking of mentoring young people today, you have to be far more the mentor that Dr. Kiran is saying, and there's a workshop today called non-positional mentoring, which is where can the mentor not take on that position of I know everything and I'm here to facilitate, and you have to sort of listen to me. Because in the end, actually, that young person's life is going to be very different and a very different trajectory from yours, right? How can you make yourself available for them, for what they need, rather than figure out how this is a platform for what you have done to be, so I would say that that's such a different mindset shift. And there are a whole bunch of workshops over the summit, which is on the processes of mentoring. How do you train? How do you learn some of these skills that I think will be very, very important for anyone designing mentoring programs?
No, thanks, Kiran and Arundhati, because I think it's not a conversation, that many people have, right? The focus is always on the mentee, and I think it's interesting that there are, newer models and there are like workshops that kind of actually get you to think about some of this. Ian, if I can come to you, while you guys at BT have supported mentoring for a long time, we don't see the same level of interest, right, with other CSRs. I mean, even if they fund education, livelihoods, young people programs, how can we get more CSRs to fund this? What would the pitch be to them?
Yeah, I think you have to make organizations make a real direct link between what they do and the impact that mentoring can have on it. So we have here in India, much talk of the great demographic dividend, and the fact that you have such a young skilled workforce as opposed to many countries across the world and in the West where they have a very dwindling workforce of young people. And I think but one of the risks to having such a young workforce is, of course, the fact that, you have dropouts, people dropping out of school, unemployment and underemployment. And if you make a direct link between how mentoring can support and affect those, then people will realize that they are not something to be run separately to any skill or education programs that they have, but they should be built in, but naturally to any program that they have. If you have mentoring, you can reduce the dropout rates. You can get people to understand better transition into the world of work. And then once they do make it into the world of work, you've got an opportunity then that they will stay out there. Because a lot of people that go through skill development programs, when they do get into jobs, they drop out very quickly because they're not able to cope. And I think building in mentoring to these programs can affect all of those things. It can help people make the transition to work. It can keep them there longer, and it can stop them dropping out at a much earlier rate, which is always a problem with programs like that. So I think people need to understand it. People talk about soft skills when they're doing skill development or education. And one of those soft skills is giving people the confidence and the ability to transition into the world of work and helping them to overcome those barriers. And having a support to do that and to have someone who can help you navigate your way from one to the other, I think is crucial. So I think organizations start to see it as a critical component of an existing program. So it's layered into their programs rather than a separate mentoring program run standalone, would be my view.
Thanks, and maybe BT can do some of this evangelizing with your fellow CSR.
Well, we do quite a lot actually, and I'm really pleased. It took us a long time, Arundhati, as you know, but we recently recruited two women into our apprentice scheme here in Bangalore from Arundhati's program, and I apologize for it taking so long. As you know, it was a very, very long fight because our organizations, Ali, did, I think put it off thinking that, everyone's trying to recruit from the top schools, and our company's going through a great deal of change at the moment. So when we eventually managed to get these women who'd gone through, and I think a couple of them are here over the next couple of days, get them there, our people kind of went, why aren't we hiring these women? Now, these women go to colleges where there are no campus recruitment, right? So they're not getting the opportunity to get in front of employers. And we as employers are missing out on the opportunity to get women, that have got great talents that could be a great addition to our workforce. So it just needs that connector. And an organization like Mentor Together is a great connector. It brings together those women who just need to get in front of you and gets us an opportunity just to speak to them directly. So they started in September, and we've now, now our recruiters, now our kind of HR team are saying, they're terrific, can you get more? And I'm thinking, I've now spent 18 months convincing you to go down this route, and now they're coming to me. So if you get employers seeing a benefit to mentoring and to mentoring programs to their business, then that work is done for you. And I think it's been done here.
Making that link
Yeah.
more explicit, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Mark, I mean, and again, right, because you've studied this for so long, because you've been so immersed in this, if the mentoring movement in India had to learn, from the US, the lessons that you've seen happen, through your work over the last, and the research over the last 100 years, what would that be, right? What could we learn from the US? And how do we cut short the journey, right, so that we can leapfrog? We have 400 million young people. We don't have the luxury of 100 years. So what can we do to kind of cut short this journey and get there?
So I'm part of a group called the National Mentoring Resource Center, and we have those 40 researchers that you mentioned, but many more that are involved with that group. And so I threw this question out to the group to see how they would answer. So my answer is a mix of my own thoughts and their thoughts. And so I would say the first thought is that it was only about the last 25 years that I feel like the mentoring research community has established really close communication and conferences and other things to be in conversation with each other more, and I think that has helped push the field forward. One of my mentors in mentoring was a woman named Joan McCord, who was the leader of that study I mentioned to you that was conducted in World War II. And she passed away a few years ago, and I miss her, but she was really doing her research in an independent way, and now we have a network of people. So just like having a network of all of you here to talk to each other about mentoring, I think just getting that going sooner than later is important. Secondly, I think a key issue is that the research has shown that relationship-based mentoring alone can have some influence on some people, but if you really want to have a specific outcome, you have to do some specific work beyond the relationship. And so the strength of findings in studies where mentors have been trying to help youth get somewhere or do something specific or learn some specific skill do have much bigger impact than relationship alone. So relationship is the base, but then you need to build on top of that, and I think that was a slow lesson for us to learn. I think another one that is quite important is that mentors do need not only training but also support, whether that's through peer mentoring or through other more formal means within an organization, and I think a lot of our mentoring organizations have been using more of kind of a train and hope model. You give training and then you hope it works out, but you don't stay out there and keep, supporting. And so I think we've been slow to learn that. And then I think another message that I thought of, but that was echoed by my colleagues, was that it really is important for mentors to listen and to understand what the needs of the youth are. So even if you do have this agenda, this specific thing that you'd really like this youth to learn, that it's the youth that has to learn it, not you. you need to use those 2 ears and close that one mouth and listen. And so I think that also has been kind of a slow thing, because I think for much of the last 100 years in mentoring, it really was more of kind of, okay, there's these adults out here that are going to help these kids, and they've got the message to do that. And helping somebody is much more complicated than just what you inside think and feel. It's a relationship. And so anyway, I think those are, believe it or not, the main messages that have come out of research so far, according to my peers.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think we have around 5-10 minutes for Q&A. So if people have questions, and if they could keep it short, and 2 questions. Yeah, I think someone, Priya. You need a mic. No, you're not.
Thank you. Thank you for this super interesting kickoff to the summit. This question is for you, Mark. Has there been, and I know that Ian also sort of alluded to that, has there been sort of solid research that connects the role of mentoring to better life outcomes, or sort of better, not just employment, but better life outcomes, especially for disadvantaged young adults? And the reason I'm asking this is that what Arundhati spoke about, and a lot of us in the sector working with young adults find it challenging, is to be able to make that link, because these are long-term outcomes, right? These are not outcomes that you see immediately, like Smarnita mentioned, where is there a pass or fail for a student after grade 10? It isn't like that. So what is the solid evidence that we can rely upon to really advocate for mentoring, coaching, career guidance, all of those sort of what today the world terms as softer aspects?
So, like a lot of research on any specific intervention, much of the knowledge is based on relatively short-term outcomes. But I could give you references that would probably be better than whatever I could say in the next 2 minutes that I'd be happy to share with you that would show you what we do know. I am completing a study now that began in 2007 where this is the question. It's of a different kind of mentoring program. It's actually a 12-year-long mentoring program, and mentors are paid to work as mentors with 8 children at a time. And it started when kids are 6, and now they're about 20 years old, and we have data on 90% of them. And so they were randomized to get a mentor or not, and this is the exact question that we're answering. I wish I had the answers to tell you, but we're literally doing the analyses right now. So that's an example of a study, but it's a very unusual study because most studies are not like that. And getting a study like that done has taken a lot of people and a lot of different funders. But unfortunately, there just aren't a lot of studies like that. Most studies are much shorter term and immediate. There are a few, and again, I'd be happy to share. So find me, and I'll give you some references.
And just to say that tomorrow our opening plenary is entirely on the evidence for mentoring. So we'll talk about all the evidence that exists, the meta-analyses, the different types of life outcomes. You're sitting next to Livia, who's done an incredible paper on mentoring in Uganda for employment. So we'll try to cover that base of, because it's such an important question to know what do we know about where mentoring works and how it works.
Good morning to all of you. I'm Joseph Prabhu from Don Bosco. Mentoring India's youth. I've been working with the young people for nearly 35 to 40 years. And what I have learned, keep learning every day, is that these young people have resources. When we go into mentoring, as someone mentioned there, we go with a learning attitude, and it is only to shape their desires, arts desires. And one other thing that I've learned from them is that they are so psycho-emotional, and their attitude and aptitude does not sometimes match with the art's desire. They would like to be a great people, but when you really go into their attitudes and aptitudes, they don't match. How do you tune them to that their resources are rightly addressed, that not misused? Second point is that...
So do you have a question for the...
anyone can answer. Anyone can answer.
Okay.
And the second aspect is that I come here to learn. Yes, it is not only information. So that in this plenary session is that I come not only to get information, but formation for myself. And so that I can go and transform. Transformation can take place in the young people. Thank you.
So if I've understood it right, it's like how do you match aspiration to the aptitude as part of the mentoring thing? So, yeah.
I think, I talked earlier about the importance of mentoring, but the other part that I think is really strong about that is career guidance and understanding that. And that's one thing that we've really developed with our organization. So you're absolutely right. There are people who have interests, aptitudes, and abilities, and they just don't match with that. Well, they have interest, but maybe it doesn't match their ability. I grew up wanting to be a doctor. I faint at the sight of blood. I'm terrible at maths. I simply couldn't do that job. I had this romantic notion in my head that I would go off and be a doctor and take my whole family with me somewhere wonderful in the world. Well, I ended up somewhere wonderful in the world, but not as a doctor. So I think career guidance is absolutely, crucial to doing that, along with counseling, and that's kind of part of mentoring. So making people understand what they're good at, testing their abilities, and counseling through that whole process, because we have a whole load of industries that are oversubscribed, where parents are encouraging them to go into all sorts of areas that they have no interest or ability in. But also we have a whole new lot of new economy jobs in this country that are emerging all the time that people are not aware of, that might actually be a really, really good fit for their interests. And if we can go through a good career guidance program with mentoring, where it looks at your ability, looks at your skills, looks at your interests, and goes through counseling and put people on a career path, I think that's absolutely crucial. I know a great organization that does it. We've just really kind of whole transformed how they do it. So are you based in Bangalore, or? Well, I'm also based in Delhi, and the organization that runs it based in Delhi, so let's connect after this and we'll talk about, and it's a mixture of online for speed, but also offline counseling. They do really great up-to-date career counseling for kind of 21st century careers, so happy to connect you to them.
Yeah, sure.
I talked about Erik Erikson, but there wasn't enough time, so I could not, delve deeper into it, but I think, at the teenage years, everybody goes through that identity versus, role confusion. So at that time, it is the role of the mentor to make them reflect, but also the mentor can't do everything oneself. They need counselors, they need, career counselors, they need a whole lot of the staff. Everybody has to be together to be able to guide the child. And it takes time. So we have to invest time in it. If the child or youth is able to sort out the role confusion, where I want to be, what is my identity, what is my purpose, I think these are the very important questions that we can, help the child with.
Thanks, Kiran. And I think we've run out of time. But before we go, I just wanted to thank all the panelists. I think you'll have really set the stage for the next 2 days. And you've given us a sense of mentoring of the entire ecosystem from very different, vantage points, gone deep, but also given us like a broader perspective. So thank you for that. And I think we look forward to the next 2 days where we can go deeper into all the things that they touched upon, in the last 1 hour. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all of you for this extremely insightful session. But before we end our first session for today, we have somebody extremely special amongst us, Dr. Rajiv Gowda, one of our founding trustees. I would please like him to come on stage to share a brief opening remark. Dr. Gowda represented Karnataka in the Rajya Sabha from 2014-2020, and before that was a professor of economics and social sciences and the chairperson of the Center for Public Policy at the Indian Institute of Management. He did his doctorate in public policy from the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania.
Good morning. Such a pleasure to be here this morning. This has been a long journey, and I thought I should share some insights into the backstory and into various milestones that Mentor Together has achieved over the years. The backstory really, I had started an NGO called Resurgent India, focused on youth empowerment. And amongst the first couple of people to work with me was Arundhati. And we organized a career guidance camp in cathedrals, and one more focused on women, work, and the world beyond at NMKRV College. And at that time, it struck us that not just career-related guidance, but actually that our youth today, even urban youth from fairly privileged backgrounds, needed some kind of a mentor who would help them and be sort of a sounding board more than anything else. And so with that essential idea, we kept talking about these things, and then Arundhati went off for a master's at Manchester. But most interestingly, when she came back to India, and I think she had worked with Goldman Sachs or something somewhere along the way, before or after, I can't quite recall, decided that she would pick this up and literally devote her passion and extraordinary capabilities to building mentoring in India through this organization, Mentor Together. And it's been 15 years now since the organization's been set up, and it's been a very, very accomplished 15 years. Now, obviously, when we started, we had some loose ideas about what mentoring could be. And the fancy notion was there are lakhs and lakhs of professionals who are working in Bangalore, and what would it take to just match them with youngsters? And, this is just an opportunity waiting to be tapped. Well, Arundhati has been very, very careful and has started in a manner where everything's carefully thought through, tested, and sort of developed in such a manner that before we scale, we have an opportunity to understand what works and what doesn't, and to bring in a variety of protections for both the mentor and the mentee. And she initially focused the organization on disadvantaged young women. And I think that was a very, very meaningful intervention. It really made a difference to lots of lives. And then over the years, thanks to various other recognitions, the Ashoka Fellowship, and funding from many organizations, some of which are here, the organization has managed to grow and really innovate, come up with this app called Mentor to Go. And this has become something, this has been a technological platform that allows more and more people to participate in the mentoring process and to reach more youngsters. And that actually is the larger mission. How do we, we've heard words like the demographic dividend, we've talked about careers and things like that. But obviously mentoring is much more than that. It is about unleashing the potential of youth, of being there for our youngsters in different ways as they discover and take wings. So that's been the journey, and I just wanted to mention a few key milestones along the way. Well, one word that you did hear was research. And Mentor Together has actually been an organization that has simultaneously focused on sharing knowledge. And we had, Arundhati and I had written a piece called Mentoring India's Youth a long time ago. But since then, there are multiple book chapters and reports coming out. There's even been a study that was anchored out of CBPS on testing the impact of mentoring with disadvantaged youth, etc. So these sorts of initiatives are, so it's really good that she's thinking about not just doing, but also taking that step back and saying what's working and what's not, and sharing that knowledge with everyone, because ultimately there are a few more initiatives around the country that have since started and are focused on mentoring, and these kinds of insights will make a huge difference to figure out what can be sort of rapidly implemented, etc. The school-based mentoring program is a 3-year program for at-risk students in high schools, and that's the study I was talking about, which CBPS did, and it showed that mentoring had a very, very positive impact on a range of outcomes. Similarly, the Mentor to Go program has now got more than 4,000 44,000 mentees and 17,000 mentors on the Mentor to Go platform. So that's a scale that's way beyond what we had imagined when we got started, but that's where things are. And then, of course, in recent times, this idea has been catching on in government circles as well. We have people here from the Karnataka government, from the task force of Telangana, etc. And these are initiatives which governments are also embarking on. And government, as you know, one of the greatest things that government can bring to the table is scale. And so, Mentor Together has an opportunity now to work with TASK in Telangana and the colleges that are part of that program. And similarly, in Karnataka, there is a program with the Department of Collegiate and Technical Education called the Prerana Mentoring Program, and Mentor Together has become a partner there as well. So as you see, and as we will be discussing in the course of today and tomorrow, this is a journey that has picked up momentum and scale, and I think as I see a full hall here with so many people interested in taking this whole mission forward, I'm very confident that what began as small ideas have been nurtured over a decade and a half and are now at a stage where they can really seize what we call a hockey stick growth, basically, increase in terms of reach and impact and really make a difference to our youth. So congratulations once again to Arundhati and Mentor Together and everyone here who is working on this domain, and look forward to more deliberations, more impact and achievements in the years to come. Thank you so much.
I'd now invite my colleague Ashita to come on stage, and sir, we'd like you to please give away mementos to our panelists. Smarita Shetty. Dr. Kiran Modi. Ian McBride. Dr. Mark Eddy. And Arundhati Gupta. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Sure. Okay. Thank you, everyone.
So we'll have a quick 10-minute break and then the parallel session starts, so you can see this.